Well, today I wanted to kick things off by talking about, and I know with this group, we don't need to spend a ton of time talking about this, but I think um, there's other ways to think about this topic of quantifying your operations team that might not necessarily have something to do with you planning things for your team, but it could have a really big impact on like your specific goals that you have in your role when you're working with the person that you report to potentially. Um, the reason that this topic actually came up around quantifying your operations is because I mean, and obviously, as you all know, it's a lot easier to set goals as a salesperson. It's very easy to say, I want to have, I'm going to have this many closings, which you can reverse engineer all the numbers to get to that point. And operations is a lot different. And I think a lot of times people struggle with understanding how do I quantify the things that I'm doing to know whether or not I'm winning. And that's really one of the main, I would say, like questions I would ask myself if I'm ever working on something and I'm like, how do I quantify this? I have to ask myself, how would I know if I'm winning? If Scott came to me and said, how do we know if we're winning in this project? I need to be able to explain that. So that's kind of the filter that I've used on setting goals for things that we're doing operationally. So I wanted to open it up to this group. Are are any of you currently, what kind of things are you tracking operationally that you would be able to know if you're winning or not?
I'll go first. So I guess the one of the things that I pretty much have four goals each year. One, bring a new agent to KW, bring a new agent to the team, bring X amount of transactions to the team, and then
Mm,
the final biggest one is having this year was 75% of our transactions that we want to get a review from have given us a review.
mm, mm-hmm.
Because there's some people we don't want us to get a review.
That is very true.
So being very strategic in that
That's awesome. I love that. I mean, those are tons of metrics and numbers to be able to identify if you're on track for whatever that goal is. So that's great. Anybody else? Is anybody else doing that currently in their business?
No. Jessica, you're making me feel really bad about the things that we're not tracking. But and also I think this is my first time actually hopping on the group here. So hi everybody. Jacob Jasperson with Jasperson Realty. Nice to virtually see everybody. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think the big thing for us, and we're still kind of figuring out how, we want to track it, but we actually just hired a transaction coordinator. And so, the big thing for us is what metrics can we put in place to make sure that we're really leveraging him to kind of the greatest extent that we can.
Mhm.
Obviously a lot of it's dependent on transaction volume, right? So it's going to depend on how many, closings you have and things like that. But then also he's been really great at helping us kind of work through a lot of the process related stuff that we haven't really focused on. And
Mhm.
so that's been a big thing. And then for us at this point now, I'm really kind of focused a lot on recruiting and bringing more agents, both, to KW, but then also to our team. And so we haven't really put any metrics around that yet, just because it's been a relatively new thing for us. But I think definitely for 2025, we're gonna put some metrics that we can measure to around the
Mhm.
recruiting piece of it.
I love that. I mean, and I'm glad. Thank you for joining us today too, Jacob. That's awesome. Um, I I would say on our well, first, actually, going off of what you said to Jessica of like feeling bad that you're not tracking things, like, don't feel bad. It's everybody has a different starting point of things that they're working on in terms of what they're looking to track. And there are things that teams track that in my opinion, I don't understand. I don't see the value in it, but that team in particular absolutely sees the value in it. So I think it's also getting really clear on what is important for your team to know whether or not you're winning, because you could go down a pretty deep rabbit hole of tracking every little thing. When I started with this team, granted, I didn't have a background in real estate, but I just came in with a very curious mindset of why are we tracking that? Why are we doing that? And I'm sure Scott got really tired of me asking why. He probably felt like I was like a 5-year-old, you know? But it was just to understand. And what we found out was there was a lot of things that he was having the ops team track that they weren't even using. So it's like, what a waste of energy and time and resources to track things that you're not even using. So just
Yeah.
make sure they're things that are going to help you in your business.
Yeah.
So.
No, total. And I feel like it's also a lot of it too. It feels good to track things for the sake of tracking it. Right. And so it's like, oh, well, we track this. And so, we have a really good handle on the business. And obviously like that's important to understand. But yeah, to your point, I feel like they've got to be key metrics that you really, and the other thing too, that I'm finding out as we're going through this is the tracking piece is obviously the first component. But then if you don't have a goal or an aspiration around it to improve it, and then you don't put a plan in place to actually improve the metric that you're tracking, then it's just tracking for tracking's sake.
Yep, exactly. So it's like things to think about are like, who's going to own the tracking of it? So who's going to be the person that's going to be doing it and responsible for it? Why are we tracking it? So what's the purpose of tracking it? And then to your point, knowing like, how do we know if we're winning or losing in this? Like, by when are we going to assess whether or not whatever this is working for us or not working for us? So setting some dates and deadlines for that. And sometimes when you're first tracking stuff, I feel like it can be hard to kind of set a goal, because if we haven't tracked it to this point, it would be like conversions for an agent. If you have never tracked contacts and dials and conversations, etc., it would be really difficult to throw around some numbers for conversions. So maybe even having like 3 months of tracking and then decide on what a goal could be. Something like that too, Mike. So yeah. Along the lines of recruiting. So, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I'm sure for quite a few people on the call, I feel like a lot of teams are looking to grow. And this might not necessarily be something that you are responsible for, but operations might be responsible for tracking where we're at to this goal. Like, it might not be your responsibility to recruit, but it might be your responsibility to track it. So for us, we are tracking how many appointments Scott is having with agents. And so very similar as if it was reversed and it was real estate related, meaning like he was working with clients. He's setting appointments, and we have an agent goal of 16 this year. So we know that Scott needs to we need to hire at least one agent a month. That's our goal. So we're not quite sure exactly how many agents Scott needs to meet with in order to hit that goal, but we'll get there. And then we'll understand like how many appointments he needs to be on and that kind of thing. So that's a newer thing that we're starting to track as a team. So good.
Yeah,
well, you were talking about.
Sorry, I was just gonna say
sorry.
I haven't done a ton of recruiting in the real estate space, but in other industries I've done a fair amount of recruiting, and the one comment that I'll make is that it is exactly the same thing as selling. You're just selling internally versus externally, right? And so like all the same metrics that you would track for, how many calls do I need to make to get an appointment, to get a close, all of that stuff is, and I'm sure everybody already knows this, right? But to me, it was just kind of like, it's all the same metrics that you would track for sales conversion data.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And something that I've learned too is I'm trying really hard not to assume, meaning like there might be things where I'm like, well, I know that. I'm sure other people on this call know that, or you know what I mean? And I think a lot of times people do that. And it's like, there's a lot of things I don't know. And I think people assume that I do know. So I love that you mentioned that. It's just good for people to hear. So, Well, I know we have quite a few people that do TC work on this call right now. Jacob had mentioned like looking for some metrics to help this TC to be able to start with. What are some metrics that on the TC side that you all are responsible for?
I think one of the biggest ones that I had, especially when I was really first starting out, so we have like a representation fee or a transaction fee along with our commission. And I was forgetting to verify that that transaction fee was like on the Alta, that we were getting paid that. So that was actually a check mark in my column just to verify that that was there. I don't know if it's necessarily something that can be, I mean, it can be tracked. I don't know how would you specifically quantify the percentage of yes, this is done or not done, etc. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I've been kind of keeping track of, again, don't know how to completely, some of it's out of our hands, but just having that data available as far as how many days from list to AO, how many days from AO to closing, and how much percentage of the list price did they get. And that's, I use that actually for both buyers and for
Mm-hmm.
sellers, because all of that data goes into the entire team's like, this is what we do, this is our, it's a great strategy point when our agents are going on their buyer and listing presentations, like here's our track record, this is what you can expect, that once we go start looking at houses, this is the cadence that we like to operate in. So we move fairly quickly and we like to keep that fairly quick.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love what you said about the list to AO and stuff like that. We don't, the only numbers that we have are really what MLS will tell us. So I love the idea of tracking that. But to your point, it's not necessarily like something that is controllable, but that's data for us to be able to have, to know, to then support the agent. So I love
Yeah,
that.
I like that too, Jessica. So are you guys, because I know in Command, like they have, I think some like rudimentary built-in functionality to kind of like track it as it goes through different stages. Are you guys doing that in Command, or are you just tracking it in like a giant spreadsheet with all of you, and you're just like putting dates in when things happen and tracking it that way?
I'm kind of doing a mixture of both. I don't get too into the weeds in Command because it's cranky and they're constantly changing everything. So the spreadsheet that I track everything on is called the Beast, and I'd be more than happy to share that with you. As far as like all the different data that I keep track of and how I keep track of it and such like that. So be more than
That
happy to share that with you.
that would be awesome, because we're actually like going through the process right now of trying to determine like whether it makes sense for us to get a standalone like CRM or transaction management system versus using Command or like using spreadsheets. The challenge that we have now is that from a number of transactions standpoint, we don't have enough volume to really kind of like justify investing in another software platform. But knowing that the goal is to continue to grow and expand and add more agents, I can envision it being a bottleneck at some point down the road. And so we're just trying to like balance out the cost and the benefit of doing it manually versus, paying for a software platform for it.
Oh, for sure. And my favorite word is free. So if it's pretty much not in Command or a Google Drive, I don't deal with it because it's too much of a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And I have more control. So if I feel like changing things up, I can easily just go ahead and move a column around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, Jacob. I can send you some examples of some programs that I know some of my colleagues use for transaction management. It's a good mix. Some of them use Command. We use Command. We actually earlier this year met with Jessica several times to talk through how to build out our full checklist in Command. It was very helpful. So, and I know she's very willing to
Yeah.
help share things, etc. So that might be a good place to start. So, but
Yeah.
that
That
could
would be
be that
awesome.
when we're talking about tracking, like it could be that once you get to a certain um, GCI number, it could be a profit number, whatever. Once you get to that point, then it's like, all right, now we're going to look to purchase like a CSU or software to help with transaction management or whatever it might be. So, yeah. Yeah, good point. Another one that we didn't talk about yet, around on the TC side, and it's kind of, it just depends on who owns it. And I think that's probably one of the most important things is just making sure it's clear who owns this, but tracking the number of reviews that you're getting and the number of referrals that you're getting. So a lot of times I've heard in the operations community, those two things tend to fall on the operations team to get and to ask for. On our team, we don't really operate like that. We actually put that on the agents as an agent responsibility. But either way, just getting clear on who is responsible for asking for a referral and asking for a review by the time the transaction is closed and tracking that. So, yeah,
no, those are definitely good ones. And I know we're semi-tracking that now, and that falls on operations now currently to follow up after the transaction and ask for the review from a review standpoint. But from a referral standpoint, that is still kind of falling on the agents. But we don't, and we need to put a metric in there for how many we would expect them, how many referrals we would expect them to get in any given, month, year, quarter, or whatever.
Yep. And I know Jessica mentioned that as part of her on the operations side. I think that's a great goal for operations people to have how many referrals they are going to bring. So that could, like, we're throwing the word referral around, but I mean more like their sphere, people they know, like, and trust them, people that know them from across the country that are referring people over to them. Like they have their own kind of referral goal, if you will. And then there's another referral goal on top of that, which is more getting referrals from the clients they are already working with. So,
yeah.
We ask as TCs, we ask for a review and provide a link in our goodbye email that we send to both buyers and sellers. And then I know that Sarah, who's part of our admin team, tracks the amount of those that we have. I don't know necessarily if we track the percentage of how many people actually do the review, like you mentioned, Jessica. I think that's really interesting. How do you do that? Do you just go on to, like, where are your reviews housed? Are they on Google reviews or where are they, Jessica?
Yeah, so they are on Google reviews. We don't really do anything with Realtor.com or with Zillow, that sort of thing. So I just have a column in my spreadsheet, like I've sent this person, the review request. I usually on closing day, like first thing in the morning or right before they're closing, as a text message, so that way it's right in front of them. It's easy to click the link. And then I just follow up probably at like the end of the week or the week following, or just keep cycling through just to see who's actually given the review. And then that's the next column of review received. So.
Yep. Our goal is to get 80% of our closings in 2025 to get a review from them. So, because we understand there's fallout, not everybody wants to do that. We don't want everybody to do that, to Jessica's point sometimes. So yes. So then we'll just track to that monthly where we're at to our goal. So yeah, good point. Anything else from on the operation side, things that you are tracking right now? One of the things that I wanted to share that was very interesting. So a little background, because I feel like we have quite a few new faces on just on this call in general. So the topics that we bring here to this monthly mastermind in the Market Center actually come from, I'm in the KW operations community. So it's a community that's run through KW. Nicole Zuber is a KW operations maps coach, and she leads this community. She also has a separate group of ambassadors. So I'm one of her ambassadors. So I basically take the information from the mastermind that we have with her. She does a little private one for us to help us in these conversations. And we take that information and bring it back to the market center is the purpose of it. So one of the things that we talked about yesterday in this conversation was, if one of your goals this year is to develop a checklist or some sort of new system or process, people also kind of get hung up on the fact of like, well, how do I quantify creating a system? Because it's a system. I'm not, it's not a, like, how do I attach a number to that? So part of the conversation, and that's why I wanted to bring it here, because I feel like a lot of people on this call tend to work on creating things like that, creating systems and processes and playbooks and things like that. Think about it from a percentage standpoint. So if I'm trying to think of an example. So actually a great example for me for 2025 is I'm completely redoing our it's not really onboarding, but it would be like an operations playbook. So like everything of how our team operates would all be in one place, because currently it's in like 1,000 different places. So I've got that project that I'm going to have done by the end of 2025. So if I'm looking at the 4 quarters, or if you operate on like the 12-week year, et cetera, by the end of quarter 1, I want to have 25% of that project completed. So that's my goal, is getting 25% of that done. And I mean, granted, some of this I think is a little theoretical, because it's like, well, what does that mean exactly? But I have an outline of all the things that I need to have done for this. And I'm going to break it up into these 4 chunks to have this first 25% are going to be these 10 things. And then the next 25% are going to be these 10 things, that kind of thing. Because again, through the lens of the question of how do I know if I'm winning, I'll be able to tell at the end of quarter 1 to say to Scott, hey, I'm at 25% of where I wanted to be for this operations manual that's going to be done by the end of the year. So, or if I'm behind, then it's like, all right, in quarter 2, I need to be at like 30% to make up for the 5 that I didn't have in the first quarter. So just use the lens if you're having a hard time with it of like, how do I know if I'm winning?
And I also think, like, especially with some of the larger, like something like that, where it's like I'm completely redoing or amalgamating everything that we had in 50 different places all into one, like that's not something that you're going to be able to sit down and like bang out over a weekend or something like that. And it, like, for me at least,
right,
personally, like I feel like it's hard when I've got something that just continually remains on my to-do list over and over and over again, right? Like it gets very disheartening. So breaking it into the chunks, I think I know that's been helpful for me when I'm trying to like tackle larger projects that are going to span multiple weeks of like, okay, let's break it up into, and then it's easier to track, to your point of, am I on track to do this by the time that I said I did, or do I need to pick it up a little bit?
Yep, definitely.
Usually with a project like that, I like to sit down first and do an idea soup. So I'll just write down anything and everything regarding this project, what needs to go into it, like with a playbook, what do I need to talk about, or be a part of it. And then from there, it's easier for me to visualize and separate out what is a higher priority. Like I need to get this system, like say, for example, the operations manual. This system's really important that we do day in, day out. It's a high priority type thing. So those are the things that I'd like to get kicked out first versus like the agent love portion, like tell us your favorite color or what's your favorite candy bar so we can celebrate you. That stuff's like a B priority that can get to whenever. Or when I'm overwhelmed by the A priorities and want to shove it in there just to keep me going, sort of deal. So that's kind of where I like to approach big projects like that. And then if there's like a lot of different files all over the place and I know I need to combine them all, I'll just make a new folder, put them all in there. That way I can all see it at once. It makes me it's a very visual thing. Post-it notes are also.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I was actually just trying to find a document that as like another number tracker When I was working with Nicole one-on-one, Scott and I were working with her one-on-one for about 6 months. I had a document that I had to send to her every single week. And the reason I bring this up is because it brought a ton of awareness and developed a really solid habit for me of growing our database was one of our top priorities at that time. And it still is a priority, but it was a main priority for us. And so every single week I had to, in this form that I had to send to her, I had to put what our current database number was, and then how much we grew it in that last week, or how many it went down. Because having it go down was not a bad thing. I mean, if we were getting rid of people that aren't a good fit and are, we're continuing to spend money on with our 36 touch, that's not a good use of time, money, effort, etc. So but if we knew that we wanted to grow our database to get to, I want to say it was like maybe 2,200 or something like that. So every single week we were talking about what are the things that we're doing in this next week to grow the database. So if that's not something that you're thinking about, that might be something to look to add to your GPS or your plan heading into 2025.
Yeah, for sure. I unfortunately I have to also bounce to another meeting at 1:30 or 12:30 here, but I appreciate everybody's thoughts and inputs. We'll definitely have to start jumping on more of these calls as we're ramping up our operations side of things. So appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Jacob, if there's anything I can do to help on the side, please let me know. I'm very happy to help. So
awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Yep, you're welcome.
Bye.
I know our team does a ton of tracking for every single thing. We have weekly, the agents check in with Judy on who they called, what appointments they got, if it's buyers, listers, if they had a consult. So weekly, she's keeping up with that. We have a board we keep up with quarterly for the amount of units sold, bought, and the amount coming in, the profit, and then we have what the commissions are, and I must keep up 20 spreadsheets for all of that tracking.
Yeah. Do you feel like and you're with Judy Hebner's team, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Do you feel like all the things that you track are they things that your organization is using to make decisions in your business?
Yep, and actually yesterday we just had our 2025 planning meeting with our whole team, and we went through every spreadsheet we had, went through it, and it keeps track of all the leads that each agent gets. Are they working those leads? Are they closing with those leads? Should we give them to somebody else if they're not getting as many closed, or should we stop giving them leads for a while until they get caught up with that? So every spreadsheet I have, unfortunately, is one that has to be kept up all the time. And they are working for the agents to know where they are at too.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, that's a really effective and good use of time. One of the things that our coach said to us earlier this year was, he was like, I feel like a lot of times in operations, we are trying to operate to be very efficient. And that's why we're brought on board, is to help create more efficiency inside of a business. And efficiency is great. But his question was, what do you think is better? Something being effective or something being efficient? And what we found was that a lot of what we were doing was efficient, but it wasn't effective. So meaning like, sure, that's fine that we had all this information, but we weren't using any of it to make any decisions in that area. So it's like, why are we doing it that way? So that's great to hear that you're using it to make good decisions for your business. I mean, that's the purpose of tracking all the things that you decide to. So
but then it's even for, Kathy, our ISA, is she spending her days actually making calls, or is she doing more admin work, more emailing, texting, which is not, she needs to do more calling. That's her job, is to call, but she's spending too much time after looking at her tracking, doing other things than making phone calls. So that gives Judy, okay, well, we need another ISA. We need somebody else to do that admin part of that job and someone would just be on the
Yep.
calls. So sorry, I have
Yep.
one of my granddaughters here and she just
Yeah.
looking at the screen.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the call, sweetheart. That's awesome. Oh. Well, and I appreciate you sharing that too, that you're tracking all those things and that you are using it to make decisions in your business. I mean,
Yep,
that's
a lot of
again,
decisions.
really the
Yep.
point. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Well, if anybody on the call is working through things and they're like, I don't know how to quantify this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk through it with you. I don't have all the answers. I took a ton away from this conversation yesterday because I have certainly been in the boat of getting caught up of like, well, how do I quantify this? And how, and meaning like, how do I quantify it in a way that it is effective? And I'm not just doing that because that's what I'm being told to do. Like it's there's a purpose behind it. There's a reason behind it. So I learned a lot yesterday, which was very helpful. So um well, good. Well, now the next thing I wanted to talk about, unless anybody else had any questions about tracking and kind of quantifying on the operations side. Okay. So the other thing was talking about like a lot of times this time of year, people are auditing their processes and systems. And it kind of goes into another like point that I had on my Facebook post of thinking about systems that they have in place right now and systems that they need heading into 2025. And a lot of times this time of year tends to be a really great time for people to be able to sort of have a little bit more downtime to be able to assess systems and processes that they have and work on improving some of them or making changes inside of them. What all are you working on right now, systems wise? Are we working on things like that? Just looking to share with the group to see like if there's people on this call that are working on similar things that maybe you could help each other offline, maybe you could share the thing that you're doing, that kind of thing. That's really the purpose behind it.
That's why we meet at the end of every year for our 2025 planning for all the agents to see what systems are working, see which ones aren't, which spreadsheets are working, which ones aren't, which are we actually following, and which are just kind of waste of my time. But yeah, I mean, that's our whole point of that, to get all the systems working and get all of them hopefully running smoothly.
Yeah.
Or more smoothly than they were this year.
Yep. No, that's good. And I feel like a lot of times people are busy throughout the year. So, it'll be like, well, I'll work on that when I have a little bit of downtime, which tends to be around this time of year, at least what I've seen. Things seem to be picking up for our team right now, which is interesting. I feel like in the 5 years I've been with the team, this typically is like a slower period, and it seems to be a little bit busier right now, which is great. But one of the things that I'm working on with one of my coaching clients around this is she is taking 2 full days. She has it completely blocked off in her calendar, and she is taking a full look at their entire listing process. So like the minute that somebody reaches out to one of their agents and says, hey, I am interested in selling my house. And the purpose behind it is she's looking at documenting every single touch point with the client. So she wants to make a note of every single time that the client is communicated either from the agent or from the operations team, and just seeing how many touches over the course of a transaction typically happen. And then how do they elevate that experience? And she's like, I'm always like, it's kind of like putting like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, and it's not really coming to me. But let's say you had a boat and you had 10 leaks in it. And it's like putting the what she was doing was basically putting a band-aid over some of these leaks and then jumping to the other leak and putting a band-aid over that one. And while she's putting the band-aid on that one, the one she put a band-aid on is like kind of coming off. And she was like, I need to just have time where I can that's the only thing that I'm going to do versus just trying to patch these holes. I want to basically completely redo this thing. So we work together, and that's actually what she's doing tomorrow and Friday of this week is completely blocking off her calendar. Nobody can reach out to her, so she can actually look at all this individual steps. So I'm excited to hear what she comes back with. But that had me thinking, like, where else can you do this in your business? So just something to think about, because I feel like a lot of times we're just operating on autopilot and we're like, yeah, that's not great, but it works, or it works for now. But it's like, as an organization, I mean, even going back to what Jacob had said, is they're looking to grow and add agents. Is what you're doing scalable to, is what you're doing now going to work when you have 5 more agents on the team?
Yeah, so
So
we just also started, I have from the time a listing comes in, a client, I have a spreadsheet that's 2 pages long of this, what I do at the very beginning and how it should end. Each agent has that same spreadsheet because a lot of my time is taken up by filling out the things or finding the things that the agents are missing. So they have their own checkoff list, the same as mine, and they have to check it off as they're handing it to me. And I get to hand it right back and say, we're missing this, 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 and this. This is your responsibility to get this, not mine. Especially, you know, descriptions. And I mean, I've never seen the house. They have. So yeah, and it's working so far. We just started that because, like you said, we have too many agents for me to keep up and keep track of, and Judy wants to hire a couple more, so it needs to be a protocol of what actually has to happen per listing, per agent.
Yep. That's actually a perfect example too of, is that the most efficient thing? Probably not. But is it effective? And it's like, if it's effective, that's great, because then once you get into a rhythm of that continuing to be effective, then you can make it efficient.
Yes, then it will be more efficient for me to do my job. Yep.
We did that with tracking numbers. So we've had several fancier systems and tools to track numbers, and it didn't matter because I couldn't get the agents to do it every day or once a week. And so we were like, okay, yes, we have this system that's effective, but like, it's really not working. And it's not, or sorry, it's efficient, but it's not effective. So we went back to every single week we meet on Zoom and they have to manually report their numbers, and we put it into a spreadsheet. And it's painful to me. Like, it's painful to spend time doing that, because I'm like, it doesn't have to be like this, but it's like, that's more effective for us to make good decisions versus trying to be efficient using this other thing and not having the information we need to make good decisions.
Same with us. That's why we need the numbers every week. Now they have to email and or call Judy every Monday with those numbers, because having just the forms online for them to fill out was not working.
Yep. I will say I also really liked what you mentioned, Lori, asking the team what's working and what's not. And so for the other people on the call, if you're not really sure maybe where to start with something like this, or what system do I tackle first, or ask people on your team, or take a look at things that you feel like should be working better than they are. We had a team meeting a couple weeks ago, and I think Scott was out of the office, so I was leading the meeting, and I just said to the team, I'm like, what do you all need? What do you all need that we don't currently have? And so they rattled off a handful of things, and they're really good about bringing that stuff to me anyways, which I appreciate. But one of the things that they said, which is what sparked the need for wanting one place where like all of our playbooks are, and literally all of our systems kept in one place, is a manual. And they were like, hey, your playbooks and stuff are awesome. I'm just having a hard time finding them. I'm like, oh, that's good to know. So now I'm going to create something where they're all in one place for them, so they can very easily go and find that information versus having to come and ask me for that information first, or search in their email.
And we also did that just probably a month or 2 ago. Everything is now in the Google Drive, in our own team Google Drive, under separate folders. So they don't have to ask me for it either. Everything's got its subfolder, and the agents all know where to find it. And yeah, that's been super helpful to just have everything. We had it on a OneDrive somewhere, and then we had it on a Google
Mhm.
Drive, and then I don't know, all different places. But yeah, so now it's all in our Google House to Home Team Drive.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. And I know Google can be kind of funky because it's like you have to share stuff with people and then people can't find
Mhm.
it. And
Yeah.
um, but the other thing with that, with having it all in one place, um, thinking about too, if you just take like a mental note, because I feel like the people on this call tend to be the people that people come to for answers. And even just making a note of like, what are the questions that people are asking you? And are people coming to you with the same question over and over again? Because that also could be an indicator that there is either like a gap in your system, a gap in your process. Maybe you don't have anything in place for that currently. And that could be just a good reminder of like, this, we need to have something in place for this, for example. A good example of this for us is open houses. So in the last, I would say last year, this time, nobody on our team did open houses. It wasn't a thing that our agents did, and it wasn't necessarily really needed, right? But now the agents on our team, all of them do at least 3 open houses a week. And so we never, ever since I've been in this role, we've never had a process for that. And so I was getting like messages on Discord. People were texting me, they were emailing me like the information for their open house. And I'm like, this is nuts and really irritating to me because I'm getting it in all different ways. It's not all the same information. It's not an effective use of my time. So I sent out an email to all of them. I was like, hey, new system, new process. If you need open house materials, you need to email me by this day in the week. And this is all the information that I need to be able to do the things for you to send it back to you so that you have it so you can go do what you need to do for your open house. And that's been working really well. I've had to do some reminders. Some people are still like texting me, and I'm like, hey, great, email that to me. So it's like also making sure that I am pushing them to follow that new system that we're looking at implementing. So, but I found myself getting really frustrated, and I'm like, why are they doing this? But they just didn't know. That's not their fault. Like there was no system. So they were just reaching out to me in whatever way, shape, or form they could or thought of. And I'm like, that's not their problem. That's a me problem. So I need to create something for them so they know exactly what they need to do. And I feel like things have been working a lot smoother since then. So just take a mental notice and things that people are coming to you for and ask, is this a one-off thing or is this something that it would be helpful if we had something created to help manage this or help answer this question so that they could go to that first versus coming to you potentially too.
And a lot of times it's the best at your meetings, your weekly team meetings, see what's frustrating the agents. Because if it's frustrating them, it's probably frustrating you. So come up with a solution instead of just being annoyed every day with the same questions.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I know our listing department is working right now to kind of retool and refine their systems. We have 2 people that's their job is to do listings. So when they're working with sales agents who have a listing, they are developing right now a Google questionnaire that agents have to fill out to gather some of that information about listings. Again, so that information just gets kind of dumped into one place instead of having, like you're saying, Katie, an email, a text, a phone call, right? All this different information. It's always the same information, right? It's the same questions that we're asking when listings are being sent to go live and whatnot. So that might be helpful. I don't know, the Google Forms, just because then there's less of like a paper trail that you have to be chasing down all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea. We've also been going back and forth if we should move it to a Google form. So for our listing, our agent partner is what we call her, but that's what she does is she helps the agents to prepare their listing. She goes to the photo shoot, she's taking measurements, etc. we have everything in like a standard email, and we try to encourage the agents to use that one email thread for all of the information that they have about that listing prior to it going live, so that Dawn could go back to it at any point and look in there for additional information that they're providing. You know, if they have their title, if they have what inclusions are there in the property, things like that. And we've talked about doing a Google form. We're just not sure yet, because that email, sometimes they don't have all the information right away. So we're like, okay, if it was a Google form, how could they add information to a property? But it's something we've been talking about too, because we're now to the point where the way that we're doing it is effective. And it's like, now how do we take it from being effective into being efficient? That's kind of the bridge that we're at right now with that. So, and it could be that the email is just the best way to do it.
Yeah, it could be. And I know we also have, we use the Google Drive to house all the folders, and each property that we list has its own folder. So all that extra data that's being gathered just goes into the folder.
Yep.
And it's really easy for transaction coordinators to go in there. Like if we need receipts, for example, like for the title company or anything that needs to be reimbursed, that's all in that one folder.
Yep.
So I think that, I don't know, for us, that works really well for efficiency. But effectiveness, sometimes we could do better on that as far as making sure that all the materials actually get into the folder. So
Right.
that's what we're working on right now.
Yes. Oh, that's funny. It's always something. I feel like that's always something to keep in mind too, is that the at least in the way that I operate in life is that that system is never going to be perfect. I mean, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about flawed human beings that are doing these things. So there's always going to be something. So like making the goal for it to be perfect, I feel like is unattainable. So it's like, let's build in some humanness to the fact that we're working with, I love the phrase of herding cats. When I first started here, I was in a training and they used a video where these like little kittens were in a basket, and like they were jumping out of the basket, and it was like operations job to like keep the cats in the basket. And so like one would jump out and they'd like put it back in, but then like while they were putting it back in, another one was jumping out, and they're like, this is what it's like to be in operations working with salespeople. I'm like, I think about it all the time. Like it's very true. So um well, good. I mean, with the last like 5-ish minutes or so, I mean, are there any like topics you want to bring up? Anything that you are looking for feedback on from the group on the call? Um, things you're excited about? Anything else anybody else wants to share?
I have a question.
Yeah, perfect.
So we also are doing some adding to our team, not necessarily recruiting agents necessarily, but adding people. And we likely will have another admin team member soonish. So just wondering like the onboarding process in terms of getting people acquainted with and using the systems that we have set up. Like what are some of the ways that you help people to onboard?
That's a really good question.
Curious. Because different teams do different things for their sales agents as far as what they require, and transaction coordinators do different things. Listing coordinators do different things. So, you know, even the positions are different sometimes. So just trying to, I feel like our team does a good job of that. I'm not the one who does that, but just curious, like as we're refining our processes, if there's anything that we could think about as our team continues to grow.
Does your admin have a protocol list, just like a whole protocol?
Yeah, I think, yeah, Peggy has a list of that.
That's always a good thing for them to look through to know what they're supposed to be doing. I
love this question though. I mean, I feel feel like the idea of onboarding is going to continue to be a very relevant topic, especially heading into 2025. Mostly because of even what they shared yesterday in this mastermind was that the total number of homes sold is, I think they said it was like the lowest since 1995, I think, is what Gary talked about in his top mastermind this past week. And I'm sure Charlie will talk about some of those numbers and stuff when they get those graphs. I know our maps coach just sent it to us, but we're probably going to see a lot of like teams, maybe even merging together, solo agents joining teams. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. And so it's like, how do we, what does that process look like? And does the current onboarding process support where you're headed in terms of what your organization is going to look like? I know for us, for onboarding with operations, so we onboarded Dawn. I'm pointing like she's here. Nobody's here. But when she started with us in January, thankfully we actually had the two people that she was taking, we really combined these two roles, and we had these two people stay on with us to help get her trained. It was very hands-on. So she was doing a ton of job shadowing of a lot of different roles to understand more of like the whole picture, the whole scope of things. So she went on several listing appointments with Jeremy and Jackie and just observed to understand what the conversations were like, what her what her role in that is going to be. She also got very plugged in. Like Robbie is a huge resource for her. There's a small little community of rockstar TCs in the office that get together, and she's really leaned into that group, which I'm very thankful for because I don't have any experience in that role, so I can't really help her with a few of those things. So I would even encourage, as you're bringing on some new people, like help them to also find a tribe of people, not necessarily just inside of your organization, but outside your organization to help bring some leverage even to your onboarding process too. But I think shadowing is the best way to do it, in my opinion. Like, hey, come watch me do these things and let me explain to you and talk through exactly what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. While you're doing that, even just creating some videos for those people to watch, I think is effective so that you're duplicating those efforts. And if you hired for that role again, you could use those videos again too. I don't know, what else have you guys done?
Same as you. We have any new admin, TC, ISA, just shadow everybody who else is doing their job before they end up leaving and the new one comes in.
Yep.
Or being added to it. They just a lot of shadowing.
Yeah. I like the idea of like, and I always butcher this phrase, but it's like, three different parts to it. It's like you can, because it also helps with understanding different learning styles. So really understanding, how does this person best learn? I think it's really important to understand that, because if they're a visual learner and you're just sitting and talking to them, it's a huge waste of time. So if they're visual, you need to have visuals for them. And maybe that's the shadowing part. If you don't have anything like put together yet, that's just them watching you work and explaining why you're doing what you're doing. Record it while you're doing that, so then you can use that again in the future potentially. But I know everybody does things a little bit different too when you do shadowing. So I would just make sure whoever it is that they're shadowing, like you like you approve of what they're doing, if that makes sense, or like approve of the process that they're doing and making sure that they're doing things the way that you want them to be trained on. So, but yes, I think the shadowing part helps a lot. So, and I think it depends. If they've been in real estate before, it's different. So I think it just sort of depends. Robbie, I can't hear you if you are talking. Now you're on mute. The suspense about what he's going to say. Shoot, the universe is silencing you, Robbie. um, I'm trying to think what else.
In the chat, Robbie. Write it in the chat.
Oh yeah, good point. The other thing I think is helpful with onboarding is, and I know this part can be a little painful. At least I have felt the pain of this, of when you do bring on some new people, it does force you to say, like, do I have documents to be able to train them on? And if I don't, it's like, okay, but now I need to create them. And maybe you create, like, you're building the plane as it's flying, which I know isn't ideal, but you can create some of these documents while you're working with this person so that you're not just working with this person and still not building out anything. Something that one of my other coaching clients that I had the opportunity to work with earlier this year, something that their team does, and they're actually with Place. And I think that Place helps to really like instill this mentality in the way that they effectively train their virtual assistants. But they will train whoever it is. We'll just use a virtual assistant as an example. They'll go through and train their virtual assistant through video and through job shadowing, et cetera. And then they actually, part of their onboarding is to have that person create the training. So like part of it is like, hey, write down everything that you just learned in like a step-by-step guide. And so you're helping to reinforce the information that you just learned, that they just learned, and you're being able to use that as maybe some future training documents in the future. So
that's what I did actually when I started my job 2 years ago. I just started writing everything down so that I wouldn't forget later on when I became familiar with the process, what it was like to not know anything. And that was helpful, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think it's like that creates some leverage. And I think it does help people understand it at a further level when they would need to create essentially their own training document to be able to refer back to if they had questions. So
exactly.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. So it looks like Robbie said it was very helpful when I was learning to TC that I got an old offer to purchase and go over and pull dates and deadlines out of, and then have to explain why something might have moved, etc. Yep. So using some old examples to help train people too. I love that. It's a good example. Good. Well, I know we're right at 1 o'clock and I need to jump to another meeting, but this was a great conversation. I really appreciate all the feedback, and especially as we talk about quantifying on the operations side. What you're doing has a huge impact inside of your organization. And so the more that you can quantify it, the more that it is proving your value to your organization. So it just gives you sturdier legs to stand on for all the awesome, amazing work that you're doing for your organization. So if there's anything that you guys need outside of this, please let me know. But thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. Yep. Bye.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Yep.